headless code. I realized that I there's probably a better way to do what I'm trying to do. And I didn't want to do it this way because I was trying to avoid changing the classes that they have from Godot. But I think that it's gonna be better if I do this because a lot easier, and then I don't there's less of a chance of making a mistake, and it gives me a lot more flexibility as well. And the problem with implementing based on the name logic is that the pop-up menu requires the node to have a specific name. And even if I can get away to, even if I can get around this issue, I still think that it's just gonna be a lot easier to make the logic dependent on a Boolean variable that I put there, because it makes it a lot simpler to think about. But then the downside of this is that I'm gonna have to change the node class, and I'm probably gonna change the add child function as well, so that it depends. I was thinking about making it adding an additional argument that has a default value of false, and then passing through for the nodes that I create from code, and then when I pass that value to true, I set the other values to true as well. I'm going to explain there what I have, and as far as I know right now is working, so it is the way that I was thinking about, but there is also the downside as well that you can't update, like you can't create nodes from code and then update them from the editor and then prevent them from being reset by the code next time that you run in the way that I have there. But the way that I'm thinking about doing is probably going to be possible to do this. So I can create nodes from code and put them put any name I want on them, and they're still not going to be recreated. And also I can just update the values from the editor and then set a Boolean variable that prevents them from being reset from code. So this is going to allow me to customize after I create the nodes. But obviously I'm not really sure if this is going to work or not. So basically what I had to do here, so the first, I think I did a couple of things since last time. The first one that I did was to change the way that I was traversing the tree, because I thought that, like initially I did the recursive approach because I thought that it doesn't matter because I'm always checking for the parent-child relationship, and because I have the parents on both nodes, then it doesn't matter because the logic to add the nodes to the other tree happens on the add child node function. But the issue with this is that the order does matter, I think, because even though you're adding the nodes to the other tree in pairs, it's gonna affect the relationship, I think. I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think it's a lot easier to think about if you do breadth first search instead of the recursive approach. Because usually when you use recursion to traverse the tree, you're going from the top to the bottom, and it's gonna work like in a kind of like in a zigzag way, let's say, where because of the backtracking of the stack. So this is the most difficult part of understanding recursion, because after you call the function recursively, it's gonna get to the bottom, which is the base case you put there. Then after the base case, it's gonna continue the execution from the last place that it stopped, that it begin recursing, and that's what the backtrack does. So usually the way that I think about recursion is that you go from like a vertical approach. But if you use a queue, which is breadth first search, you're going horizontally through the tree. And the mental model that I had, that I still have for what I'm doing, is basically I'm creating a subtree, and then I'm selecting an entry point in the main scene tree to put that subtree on. And not only that, I'm comparing to see if the main scene already has some of the nodes that the subtree has, which is the caching, because I want to prevent adding the same nodes a bunch of times. So what I'm essentially doing is updating the main tree with a subtree by passing node by node, and I want to maintain the structure. So the easiest way to think about it is to do like a level traversal, which is breadth first search. So because then it allows me to remove the parents of each one each time, because then it's guaranteed that the previous iteration removed the parents. So like for each node that I going through, I remove its parents and then I add to the other tree. And then it's kind of like you're moving the pointer. So the children of the first node that gets moved to the other tree is still going to point to the previous parent, but then you can remove and the parent of that one and then update that one as well. And because you're going through the levels, it doesn't matter. As far as I can think about right now, maybe it's wrong, but that's the way that I was thinking. Also, I implemented the function to remove all the nodes from code, which is basically the same way. But I just traverse with breadth first search as well, and I just remove and delete all the nodes from code in case I want to reset the thing for whatever reason. I think I put in the bottom. It's basically this function here. So I pass the scene root and then I create a queue using a list that I have, because the queue has methods that allows you to make it. The list has methods that allows you to make it work as a queue, which is basically you're pushing nodes to the end of the queue, or like it's an array data structure. It can be any array data structure where it's like a sequential place in memory. You put values at the end and then you remove them from the beginning, and that creates like a circular thing. So it's first in, first out. So basically push the root, then I create another vector here to keep track of the ones that I want to remove. Then I'm basically getting the first value of the queue, and then I pop the first value, and then I check to see based on the pattern there, which are the nodes created from code. And then I remove them. I push them to the ones that are gonna be removed here, and then I push the children of the current one. I think this check here, I'm not really sure if it's necessary. Probably not, because this already does the count. But I did it like this because I was doing another way before. So I think I'm just gonna leave it like this because it doesn't matter that much. Then after I have all the nodes to remove, I just remove them here. And this one I wasn't sure about the order either, but I think it works because of the stuff that I said. On this vector here, they're gonna be based on the levels. And also I think that the way that Godot's design is supposed to, they made it in a way that it works this way here. Because the problem that I was thinking about is that, let's say you remove one of the nodes, and then the next iteration you're gonna remove one that was the children of that node. Then in my mind, you might have a problem because you already removed the parent. So there might be a conflict, but it seems that it is working like this, so I'm just gonna leave it like this. And the other one, I'm also using the same approach, the breadth first search. But then here I'm doing the same way that I was doing before. So I get the parent node from the current node, and the current is based on the update root here, which is the subtree that I'm gonna use to update the main scene tree, which is the scene root. So I get the parent of the first one. In the roots of the subtree is not gonna have a parent because of the way that the tree is working in Godot. So it's also gonna hit this branch, and then I put this pattern here because the subtrees are being created with the data structure that I created there on the class to keep track of all subtrees for each scene, which is going to be basically this. So I'm mapping the path of the scene to a vector of entry points, which are going to contain the name of the node that I want to insert the subtree on. And this is the point where I decided to create this pattern there. This one, which is basically means that whenever I put this pattern, I want to place the subtree at the root of the scene. And then I have the root of the subtree here. So basically, if it hits this branch, then it means that I'm adding the root. So I'm transferring the root I'm putting the root of the subtree on the main scene. Here I'm going to put at the root of the main scene, and then here's the case where I already have a node. I already have nodes on the sync tree, and then I want to place the subtree in a specific location of the main sync tree. In this case, I'm thinking more about a situation where you already created a scene, and then you created nodes from the layout, for example, and then you want to create a component that is a child of the layout node, of the editor node, but you want to create a component from code. So what you would do is just get the name from the editor for the code you want to insert the subtree, and then you would put the entry point name as the name of that node instead of HD root. And then this would allow you to insert the subtree from that place into the sync tree. Then obviously you need to have a logic to check to see if the node exists, and that's why I put this here. So if I can't find the node on the sync root, then it means it doesn't exist. I just throw an error and I return. But on both of these cases here, I'm going to call add child node, which is the function that is going to contain the logic to allow me to cache the nodes, so that if I'm calling this for the second time, it doesn't add extra nodes. It just updates them based on the nodes on the sync tree. And on the first time that I'm adding them, I'm just going to place them on the sync tree. So it just prevents me from adding multiple nodes every time that I run the code, the C++ code, to change the sync tree. So both the situations I'm adding the roots, and in this situation is the one that I'm gonna add the children, because all of them are gonna have a parent. So I get the parent's name from the current child that I'm adding. And this is the part that I'm going to change. So there's two things. One is like on the iteration here. So this is the thing that makes the queue, so makes the horizontal traversal of the tree. So for each level, you're getting all the children of that node, and then you're pushing them to the queue. So it means that the next iteration of the while loop is going to start exploring the other level of the tree. And then it's going to do the same thing for each node. So you're basically going horizontally. And it does, as far as I can think about it right now, you don't need to put a base case inside of the loop, because this already counts as a base case. So when it reaches the leaf of the tree, it's not going to have children, so it's not going to push forever to the queue, which means that at a certain point, once you have all the nodes on the queue, it's going to stop iterating, because at some point you're just removing and you're not adding nodes anymore. But then basically here I'm passing the scene root, the parent's name, and the current node should be added. Then I check based on the hash sets that I create when I load the sync tree. So when I load the sync tree, I cache all the names that the sync tree has. And here I create the pattern for the name based on the code, which is going to be this child name, which is the stuff that I'm doing now, and I'm probably going to change. So I'm setting the names based on this pattern, which is a global variable, global hash map that keeps track of the amount of classes, amount of types that each thing has. So for each type, it starts at 0. So it's the pattern that I put there to identify that is from code, underscore HD, then the class type, and then the integer for the class, which increases every time that you add a node. So if this is true, then it means that the node already exists on this scene. So I double check here. Let's try to find for the name on the scene root to get the node that already exists on the tree. And then here I'm just basically comparing the node that already exists on the tree and the node that was supposed to be added, because I want to update the properties of the one that is on the tree, which is the stuff that I was talking about. That if I put a Boolean variable here, I can do a check to see if the node is supposed to be updated or not. So let's say I put a Boolean variable that is a property of the node class. I can go on the editor, and then let's say I want to update a class from the node from the editor, but I don't want to reset these properties. After I change the node from the editor, I can just set the flag variable to true, and then this allows me to stop updating the node when it runs. So you wouldn't do anything. And then here I'm setting the name of the node again, because this might reset the name. So I'm making sure that the name stays the same. And then setting the owner, because, and this is another thing that I learned. So The reason why Godot doesn't put nodes created inside of constructors into the scene is not because the scene is not aware of them, it's because they don't have a owner usually. And this is done by design because of the way that the editor works. So it makes a lot more sense to only have the main node, because on the instantiation of that node, the initialization of the node, it's already going to put the other nodes automatically. So it doesn't make sense to expose them on the editor, because it populates things, and the only one that makes sense to change probably is the main one, the main node that is creating all the other nodes from its constructor. But if you want to expose those nodes, you can set the owner on them, and then the scene tree is gonna show them. And this was one of the errors that I was getting before. So this is the reason why I created this group here, because what I thought about it is like how I'm gonna solve this, where I only want to put nodes on the scene tree that are the main nodes created. Because the downside of this way that I'm doing here is that since I'm doing breadth first search, it's going to traverse through all the nodes on the scene, which means it's going to traverse nodes that are created from other nodes. So for example, let's say that, I don't know which one of these classes has, but a lot of classes, they create other nodes on their constructor, and these nodes are not usually exposed into the scene. So if you do a breadth first search traversal that I'm doing there, and you add nodes to the scene tree based on the breadth first search, it's gonna add them twice on the editor and on the game engine, because you are adding them once from the constructor of one of these classes, and you are adding them twice because of the breadth first search traversal. So there needs to be a way to differentiate nodes created from constructors of other nodes and nodes added outside. And this is the reason why I just created this group to see if this was the problem. And I think it is, because after I did this check here, it started working. So it removed the errors that I was getting there, and then it worked. Yeah, but basically here I'm just updating the properties. So this branch here is going to be when you're adding the roots of the subtree into the main one. So in this case, I just search for which is something that I thought about putting other checks here. I'm not really sure. Yeah, but for now I'm doing like this. So I just add to the scene root the child, because I know it's not gonna, like, this is the point of putting this pattern here is supposed to put directly on the root. So I'm just setting there, and then I'm setting the name of the node with the same pattern. And here is the one that I changed as well. So this, because I'm putting all the nodes that I add there on the scene as part of the group that I called main here, then it allows me to only add the nodes from the scene that are the main nodes, and not the nodes created inside of constructor of other nodes. Because if you don't, then it's going to add all of them, which is going to add them twice. It's going to add the nodes created inside of the constructor twice. And there is another thing, that the nodes created, if you don't set the name of the nodes and you put add child, then Godot is going to have a standard way that they structure the name of the nodes, which is going to have the symbol. So this would be one way as well to check. So you can check to see if the name has that or not, and if it doesn't, then it means that the name of the node was set, and then you can create other logic, but I think it's not very good. So here, the other thing that I had to do, because I was getting an error as well. So this case is when the scene tree doesn't have the nodes yet, and I have to make the logic based on the parent, the previous parent, because essentially I'm moving, because I move from the roots, then the next iteration is guaranteed that the parent is going to exist on the scene tree, because on the previous iteration I added the roots. So like the first time that this runs from the subtree to the main tree is going to go here, which means that the child is going to be added to the scene root, and then on the next iteration this child is going to become the parent, because I'm doing the breadth first search traversal. So here I think I put checks here, I think, but it's pretty much guaranteed for the parent name to exist on the scene root, because it's the previous iteration. So I just check to see if that's the case, and if it is the case, then this is the other thing that I had to change, which is basically I'm getting the current parent for the child, because like you're essentially moving the pointers of the subtree to the main tree. So the child is still going to be linked to the old parent, which on the previous iteration was moved to the sing root. But if we don't do this, then Godot is going to complain that the child has two parents. So you need to get the previous parent that the child had, and then you need to remove the child from that parent, which was the pointer from the other subtree. And then if you do that, then when you add to the new one, it's like you're just cutting the connection from the subtree from the previous subtree to put the node onto the main tree. And then you put the owner, and then it seems that it is working now. But the problem with this is this group here and the name thing, because some of the nodes require the name. There's also another problem that I'm not 100% sure. I might have to change the functionality, because this is another annoying thing. But when it comes to this, I don't think there is many things I can do. But basically, it looks like this node here depends on runtime functionality, because on the editor, I just copy it from the way that it is on the editor. And this main menu here is the thing that shows up on the left there, which is going to show the tooltip on the scene, the tab. But for some reason, when I set from here, it doesn't work. And I think it has to do because this function here is probably not caching the state of the class. It's just something that works on runtime. So in order to make this work, I have to figure out either I change the functionality on this so that it caches the state, which is going to allow me to set from here, or I have to figure out another way to set the tooltip of this so that it shows this thing. And the annoying thing is that there might be a lot of other classes that work in the same way. So essentially what I'm going to have to do is either find an approach that is going to change the state of the nodes so I can cache them, or change the functionality of the classes. And it's going to be tricky because then obviously, I think this is the reason why I was trying to avoid changing the node class, because it might change all the other classes. But I think for the stuff I'm thinking about doing, it's probably not going to be I think there's a low chance that there's going to be a conflict, because I'm just going to change, like, I'm just going to add extra functionality, and it's not going to interfere with the other stuff. So what I'm thinking about doing is setting 3 variables. As far as I think right now, 3 variables. But so I'm going to implement these properties on the node class. And then instead of using the name of the group or the groups, I'm going to do the functionality based on these variables. So the first one is going to be external. And this is going to allow me to determine whether or not a node was added as a child of another node from outside of its constructor or from inside, because the default is going to be false. And then I'm going to, this is the part I'm not really sure how to do. So because there is other variables here, it might be better to create another function. But I guess I can try to put another variable. So I was thinking about adding an additional variable with default argument should be false. And then if I pass this true, then I put a condition inside of this function that just sets the value of the external property of the node should be true. Then based on the external property, I'm going to check there on the ref for search instead of checking for the group, and also change the add child node functionality. So the other one would be cached, I think. So yeah, I have to think about another name probably, because cached is too generic. But it's going to be a variable that checks to see whether or not the node already exists on the scene tree. So the first time that I add there on the node, on the add child node, I'm going to update each property of the nodes before I add them, which means that the next time that I run, they are going to be cached. So I'm going to change the first condition. Then the locked editor state is going to be the third one, and is the one that I was talking about, where if I wanted to change the state of the node from the editor, and I don't want the state to reset, I can just set this value from the editor. So that's what I'm gonna try to do. Yeah, the problem with this one is that order matters. So I think so if I just like if I put another default argument here, then I don't if I don't specify, I think when I call, it's gonna think that I'm passing this one, which is not the case. I guess I'm not really sure if that's. I don't think I can do like create another function with the same name and just do other types because it's going to like it's not gonna be able to figure out. Uh, maybe like even if it is able to figure out, it might fuck up the other functionality from the engine. There's also another thing. So this is gonna come down to how because the structure of that child node function is the one that is a direct reflection of what I do here. So based on the way that I put the logic there is gonna change the way that I can do things from the editor. Because one of the things that I did was to change the name of this one to sing, because this is the node where the name matters. So I tried changing to sing, but then when I ran the code again, you just removed the node from the sing. And the reason why is because it's updating the whole tree, because this node is part of a subtree created by the editor. So whenever I have nodes that I changed or I add as parts of a subtree that I created from the editor, and then I run the code again, it's gonna influence on how it's gonna influence on the logic there. And the reason why it removed is because I changed the name, so it changed which condition was sitting there. Because I changed the name, it didn't find the name here, and then it went to this branch here to add new nodes. But then the parent didn't exist, the parent name, because the parent name works based on the automatic name that they put there if you don't set it. So, because on the first time that this runs, the parent is going to have the name from the previous subtree, which wasn't set if the node already exists. So, like if it is the first time that if it is the second time you're running the code, then when you add the root to the code, it's already gonna exist. So it's gonna hit this branch here and not this one, which means that it's not gonna change the name. It's gonna set the name. Maybe it's supposed to. No, it's gonna set the name of the node that already exists on the scene tree. So I guess I can update this to set the name of the child as well. So maybe that was a problem, and I can fix if I do that. So the problem is that it was sitting in this branch, and then both the parent and the children didn't exist, so it was sitting in this condition here. And then it wasn't adding the node, so it was just removing from the thing. So I'm gonna put here, and like I'm not really sure if this is necessary now because I'm gonna change things, but just for the sake of it. So I'm gonna have to spend a bunch of time thinking. And basically, like the problem is, so if I run, so this is the structure there, like the very simplified structure from the editor node constructor, which creates the editor layout, which is what I'm trying to study now. So if I run, it shows this, but it's supposed to show the tooltip here. So when you put the mouse over, it's supposed to show the message there, and it's not showing. And I'm not 100% sure why. And here, if you put, it shows the message. So this is the operations with sync files is the message that is supposed to show there. And if you set the tooltip here, it also doesn't show. So I'm trying to figure out why. So I have to set on this one. I think it has to do with the functionality of this class here. Like there's some, so I'm probably gonna have to spend a bunch of time figuring out how this works. So if you put operations with sync files or something, it's supposed to. So because they're making based on the index there, so they're putting index 0 and then they're updating the tooltip. But I think that it works on the editor because the editor works on the runtime of the engine. So like they on the runtime, on the engine initialization, they create the editor node and they put the editor node there. But the difference is the way that I'm doing the sync is I create the sync from code, then I cache the sync, and then I get the state from the cache sync. So it's different. So I'm not really sure why it's not showing here. It's supposed to be showing if after I put the tooltip there. It might be because value of like width and height and stuff like that. I'm not really sure. But the problem that I have here is that the easiest way to change what shows up there is by changing the name of the node. But because I'm making the scene based on because I'm making the functionality based on the node name, if I do this, then it messes up the next iteration. Once I run the code again to rebuild the scene or to update the state, it messes up the node here. So let me think about what should do there. It is kind of annoying to do another function there on the node class, but I think that's probably the only option. Because I don't want to I want to decrease the amount of things that can go wrong, obviously. So like ideally would be as close as possible to the way that already is. I guess I can create another variable as well for this. So maybe instead of using the string name here, I put sub3. But this, like, the thing is that this is outside of but maybe it's better as well, because I can check based on the name, based on the property. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. So right now, this name here, the way that I'm checking for this pattern, is outside of the nodes. So it's just logic from the HT manager class that is gonna because the way that I'm doing this is just to simplify so I don't have to think about on the project. So I basically just create a data structure inside of this class that is this data structure here. It's updated roots that allows me to pass a bunch of subtrees for this hash map here for each scene. Each scene can have a bunch of subtrees that are gonna be used to update the scene tree. So and then I create a function there where I'm pushing stuff to this. I'm pushing the subtrees through this, and it's when I push the subtree that I decide the name there that I put. So the name doesn't directly influence the names of the nodes. So it's basically this one. It just it just changes the name of the data structure that I'm using on the vector to keep track of the entry points. But I guess if I make another variable, another property on the node class, then it's probably gonna make it easier as well, because then I don't need. Then I can just put Yeah, I think that's gonna be a lot easier because I can get rid of the. So this is what I'm gonna do. So I can get rid of the more complex data structure and just put a vector of nodes there. And then instead of checking for the entry point there, I just put on the nodes. And it can be a Boolean variable as well because it is like only. So I'm going to put sub3 roots. Yeah, this one I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna have to change this. So I'm gonna put the values here. I think I'm going to do one by one so it's not overwhelming, and so I make sure that like if I get errors, it's gonna be easier to. The first one is gonna be the hardest, which is the. There's also this question of whether or not I put on the data or I put outside. But I think you should put outside. Hmm. And maybe you should put inside of this data. I think I'm gonna put inside because I'm gonna. Oh, it makes more sense to put inside. I think about this. So I guess I can make parts. Oh, but no, I was gonna say. Hmm. I think it doesn't matter that much how I structure, how I update there. I can make parts of the function, and I can also set. So I can put another variable here that is a boolean, and then set inside, but it doesn't matter that much, I think. Or maybe it does matter actually. I think it's probably easier to do it this way because then I can put the default as true. So, hmm. I think it makes sense to put the default as true so that the subtrees are always by default pushed into the root of the scene. And then I just set the value of the node here, I think. It's probably better than to do it outside. Because the problem, I guess I can put the default value on the node itself as well. Because I'm asking myself, maybe I don't make it as a default actually. So I think it is like it's probably better to force. So I'm gonna put it's gonna have a default based on here. So I'm going to do. What's the name? Sub3 runs. So I assume one is gonna be true. So by default it's gonna be true. Should be true. Should be. Not really sure if it should be true or false by default. I think it should be false by default actually, because there are more nodes that are not gonna be. All the other nodes should be false, except the roots. Actually, it can't be a boolean. It has to be a name. It has to be a string name because I want to be able to push anywhere that I want, not just a binary thing. But maybe I can create two different variables, but I'm not really sure if that would be. Or I can put the logic outside as well. Hmm. So I think it probably. I'm not really sure what makes more sense. I do think it makes a lot of sense to have this binary distinction of whether or not the node's going to be inserted on the root. But then obviously I need to have the flexibility. So in case I want to push the node anywhere on the tree based on the name. So that should be a string name, but I'm not really sure like what is the best. Because if I put outside here, then it doesn't change anything. Then I'm gonna still need this, but it's better to have the member variable there on the node because it's easier, like it's harder to make a mistake. Because if I make based on the string name, then there's more chances that I make a typo there, which is gonna change the logic of the add child node function. So I'm thinking about what is the best way. So obviously I can create a string on there, but I'm not really sure if it's very good. Process owner. So maybe I should do. I think I should do the other ones first then, because this one is more tricky, and I'm gonna have to change the other things. So probably the external is the first one should do, and then I put as false. So the thing, let me see if how do they have, uh, what are the setters? How they structure the setters? So for each flag variable that I'm gonna put there, I have to create a setter and getter, and then I have to subscribe into the properties of the node. And obviously I want to do it the same way that they do it because I'm putting the value there instead of the data. So I want to see how they do it. So it's probably going to be here, but they looks like they separate by category. That's work. So it's probably going to be on processing that I put. So it looks like they do this. I'm just going to copy the stuff here. So I'm going to put after all this process functions. So they check to see if it is not inside of the tree. It's inside tree. I think I'm not gonna put this check to see if it's inside of the tree because it's not like a runtime thing, I think. Hmm. I'm gonna put here. So let me think. There's gonna be the annoying part is just figuring out what is the best way to change there. So I probably should create another function. So like I'm gonna create setters and getters, but I want to make it so that I only call one function from the other code. It's probably gonna change. Like I'm just gonna. The true approaches is either change the add child so that it accepts one more argument, or create another function like add child external or something like that, and then just call the setter inside of the function. But I'm also not really sure about the name, if it should be external. I guess I'm just gonna do like this. It's gonna be external, and then I just copy this. And here I'm gonna copy this thing that they put here, but I'm not gonna do this other checks that they do. So one thing that I can do is make maybe I can do the other. No, but that doesn't make sense. I'm trying to think like if I make it as the default for the node, all the nodes should be external, and then I just where like make the default where it's gonna consider the node, it's gonna add the node to the thing, and then have to manually remove the flag so that the node is not inserted on the thing. It doesn't work. So this is kind of the problem. When I have to put these things there on the both on the bind methods and add the property. But the most annoying thing is thinking about the function. I'm gonna add after all of these other ones. Set external, external, is external. Then after you do this, you add the property. Well, the property is gonna be hard, I think. If it is too annoying to set up the property, I'm just gonna move outside the data. This I think is to add enums. Property. What's the name? I have to make a note as well. So it's unhandled key inputs. So it doesn't put in the properties there. Maybe it doesn't matter, but if I want to have access, oh, so maybe I should put outside and then um, I think this one is fine to not have the one that I need to expose on the editor is gonna be this one. So the other ones I think it doesn't matter because I'm always gonna be setting them from code because that's the purpose of them. So I don't think it matters to register as on that properties. So this one you should probably put outside of the data. I guess it doesn't matter that it is inside because as long as you have the setters and getters, it's gonna understand. Yeah, because the getters and getters are the interface between the property. So I think you all you have to do is just put on the macro there. So the way that the add property macro works is that it's gonna create a class called property info. And the property info class is gonna hold the state for the property. So it's gonna cache on the other class, which is the class info, using the class DB class. So the class DB class creates a class info class, which is gonna be is gonna hold the state for the class, and it's gonna put on a global object that the class DB manages. And then for that class, is gonna create is gonna cache the function pointers for the functions of the class based on the function names in the way that which is like based on the bind methods there that you put. So when you put the functions on the bind methods based on the name there, Godot's gonna cache those functions instead of the class info for that class. And then on that property, based on the names you put there, is gonna be able to find the function pointer using the class info that is gonna have the method bind as a property inside of the class info that is gonna keep a map or a hash map of the functions. So it's gonna map the name of the function to the function pointer. So this allows you to have the interface to the properties based on the functions you put there. So it doesn't matter that it is inside of the data because all that you need to know is the functions. The functions are the entry points. So I guess I can just put there. Oh, this one. Forgot. So I'm just gonna copy the thing and then put the names of the functions. And the next thing to do, so I'm going to I'm gonna put in the end there. It's whatever. So I'm not really sure what's the point of this thing. Hmm. It looks like it is necessary. Oh, this one doesn't have. So I guess I can remove this value here. Let's see. So this is the last value of this one. So what is the class name? I think it's hint string. So type name hints. Type name hints. Yeah, is this value here? So I think it's not necessary. Should have the other one. So here, just put that's external. So I think this should probably. So I'm gonna compile before to see if it works, but then I have to change the other functions if it works. So the next thing to do, so I'm gonna change these functions first, and then after that, I'm going to. Hmm. So maybe I should start as one. So after I change the other functions, then what I have to do is think about how I'm going to update this. So either I'm gonna create another function that is gonna be called add child external that I was thinking about, which is just gonna be exactly the same as add child, but with the other arguments. Yeah, so actually I'm gonna remove the other arguments probably. Or I guess I can change, but if I change then it's gonna mess up everything. The best case scenario would be to be able to change that child so I can use the same function and just pass another argument. But I think it's too risky because of the other arguments here. So maybe if I try the add child notify, or but I'm not really sure because then it's gonna force me to use that one. What I'm thinking about is like creating another function that is gonna wrap this one, and then I just change the arguments. Then inside the function I set the external, and then after I just call add child. So just basically like a closure, uh, adding functionality to the previous one. I guess it's so the type there is not the value, it's just the size. So it's not true or false. Yeah. So if you make it equal, it's gonna be true or false, I think. You're just signaling the size of the thing. Yeah. So I'm gonna put equal 0. Makes more sense. Because I want it should be false by default, and then every time that I add a node from the code, I'm going to set as true. And I don't want to make Sparta the HTTP manager because it's just very annoying to write to get the singleton every time and then add after. I have to write a lot of stuff. I think I'm gonna uh, Be right back, because it's probably gonna take some time. So usually the way that the build system works is that it caches after you build, it's gonna cache all the changed files. So because the node, because there's a lot of stuff that depends on the node, it has to compile everything again. So it might take some time. The next thing to do, like I said, is to change the functions there. To change the condition that right now I'm checking based on the group, which I'm just gonna change to check for external instead. And then I'm gonna change one of the, I'm gonna probably create another function called addChildExternal, and then I'll think about this later. Yeah. Then after I do that, I'm just gonna change all the functions here. So instead of adding the child, I just add that addChildExternal, remove the add_group here, then check to see if it works. If it works, then I move to the other variables. So essentially, I'm gonna map based on flag variables that I put on the node class, the synchronization of state between the editor and the code. So I'll be right back. So I was gonna recommend as well. I forgot to do it in the beginning there. So it looks like there is a error. Oh, it's external. Yeah, that sucks. Try again. So I was gonna recommend this uh, playlist here. So very good playlist. Yeah. So I highly recommend to watch this. He talks about a lot of fundamental things about computing. And the main thing that I got away, which is like a more specific explanation than the Band Eater series, is that the first fundamental logic is implemented by a multiplexer. So multiplexer is the first function that exists on the hardware, which is just combinational logic. Which I was saying combinatorial logic before, but it's combinational logic, the correct way to say it. And it's just a way to structure transistors so that you have predictable inputs and outputs. So it allows you to encode the functions on the hardware. And that's what essentially creates, so it's the same logic that is used to create gates, logic gates, is also used to structure logic gates. So you have, so you build the instruction set architecture in the beginning. And so you can encode basically the computer architecture in the hardware. So I think that the only thing that I'm gonna change, so instead of checking for the group, you call the function to see if it is. I'm gonna have to change both of them before checking to see if it works. But here I'm gonna call the function just to check if the node is external. And I think on the other one, also double check on this one, on the third condition here. Because this is gonna prevent from adding the codes that are built inside are added as children inside of the constructor of nodes, and that way I only have the main nodes that I create from the code there. So it's gonna be the same structure. So I'm just thinking about the name to put. So external. As I think about the name, I'm going to update here. So just delete all of this. In order to not spend too much time on this, I'm probably gonna create an add child external, and then think about this later as well. I think before I do that, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT what happens if I add another default argument. The problem is that I have to put it at the end, and then it's gonna end up being the same thing, I think, where I'm gonna have to specify every time that I call the unchild, so put the name of the argument and then make it equal to true. If that's the case, then it's probably easier to just to add another function, and it also decreases the risk that it's gonna mess up the functionality that already exists. So this is the biggest problem. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT, see what it says. So I'm gonna, oh, I wanna know, like, so what I assume happens if I add another default argument there is that if you wanna set the last default argument without setting the other ones, you have to specify when you call the function. But I'm not really sure if that's the case. Also, you just pass with the default again, I think. So you have to explicitly say the other ones and then add the. So I think this way is probably more confusing than just creating another function, and also increases the chances. So either I make add child external or add child ext to abbreviate, or just add external. Add external I think is kind of confusing, so I'll probably add child external. Add external child, I'm not really sure if it's good as well. If I put underscore add child, then I think it's not good as well. So just probably add child external. So the thing is, so in this other way, I'm not gonna be able to pass the other arguments, but I don't think it matters. So one is force readable name. This one might be a problem, I think. I guess I can put them on the reverse order, and then I just switch, and that's what I'm gonna do. It's gonna be which one looks better? Child external. Rad external. External. I'm think we're just gonna go with add child external since I'm not getting a response. Maybe I'll change later. So the only difference is gonna be that this one is gonna receive. So I'm gonna make this always true. Yeah, that's the difference. Because that way I can just call the thing and it's gonna be true. Here, true. Cross true. Maybe just to follow the pattern that they do there. Put B external. And there we go. Now I have to put this on the bind methods. Oh, this after the no. So here, just put. I never use this other macro, but I assume that is just to specify the default values, like the name sounds. So I'm not really sure. Like since they put the first one, I think it only matters if you have default values. So you put on the order of the default values there. That's gonna be true. So just put true. And check external. And this should be no p external. Yeah. I think that's all I have to do. And then I change all the function calls there should be. So I should try. So. No, it's just the arguments here. Yeah. Same here. I think you have to specify this so that whenever the editor or the engine is gonna use class DB to reconstruct the class, it knows that when it calls that function, it's gonna have that value as the default. So it just works in the same way that the other ones work. So this was probably gonna be, this is set on this class which is method bind. The method bind is the class that holds the state for the function. So it's gonna be the one that keeps track of the function structure. So it's gonna hold the, and if I remember correctly, there's gonna be another class that inherits from this one. that is the one that is usually used for signals and other stuff like this. But it's basically going to be the same thing, I think, where it's just going to keep the information as variants here. Variant is a class that they use to translate the types. So if you want to have a default value, it has to be a variant. I think regardless of whether or not it's a default value, it always has to be a variant because of the way that it's going to be cached. So now let me change this. So this is another thing that I'm not too sure. Because I think that's on this one I also have to do the same thing when I add instead of this function. So it's external. Because then next time that it reads, it's gonna be able to know. So I think that's pretty much it. So let me test. I probably have to do both in the state. So run with the state that I already have now, which already has nodes in the scene, and then go in the editor, delete the nodes, and then run again to see what happens from when you don't have any nodes. So if both of these work, then I add this other one for the cached. I'm gonna think about other name instead of cached. I think even if they already have a variable for this, it's probably not gonna be, because the most annoying thing about using the pre-existing stuff is that it might interfere with the logic of all the other nodes, and this is kind of the problem. So like it's gonna be a lot harder to predict the behavior, I think. So it's just a lot easier to put on another value, I think. So I was thinking about like maybe I can check based on the owner, but I think it's not very good. And I don't see any external children count cache. Hmm. 'Cause I'm concerned with the name because of the same reason. If I choose a name that is related to something else that they do and that I don't understand, it might mess up stuff. And I could make based on the group, but I don't think it's very good as well because maybe for the roots I do with the group, but I think like if you add the group, there's more chances of the typo, so it's just easier with the flag variable if you can, I think. So if I can do it with the flag variables, I think it's better. This decreases the chances of errors. For the subtree root thing, I think it has to be a string. can't be the pattern by default because otherwise I'm just gonna add all the nodes based on the same pattern. Entry point path. It's gonna be basically this check here. It has to be a string, it has to be the name of a node. So I think I'm probably just gonna put that and not make a default value. So just put instead of the data as well, and just put the whatever the name returns, just probably a string name. And then just keep the same pattern, I think. And probably, but then the only difference is gonna be that I'm gonna check for the value on the node itself instead of checking for the value on the thing there, and then it allows me to simplify because I don't need the other data structure. I can just pass nodes, and then I set, instead of calling the function to add there, I'm gonna have to call anyway, I think. Yeah, because it's better if you update first and then uh, update, create all the subtrees, then push to the thing, and then update them all at once. So I'm probably gonna have to do both. So is the thing that I was talking about where I think it might be a good idea to force this, to maintain this function the way that it is, because that way it's gonna force me to think about where the node is gonna be. But if I make it only based here on this, then it increases the chances that I'm gonna miss. Yeah, so probably that's what I'm gonna do. So the only difference is gonna be on the function that checks there, but on this function it's gonna be the same pattern. But I'm probably gonna pass the node first and then pass the string name, and then inside of the function I'm just gonna set the value on the node for the entry point. So maybe instead of subtree root, I put subtree entry point. I think that makes more sense. Subtree entry point. Hmm. Yeah, it's probably this. Checks. I think that's probably confusing because the value is gonna be set on the subtree. Yeah, so it's gonna be it is set on the subtree, but it is related to the entry point of the other one. So I'm not really sure if this name makes sense. I think that it probably does actually. I'm just gonna create entry points. It's kind of intuitive to understand what is going on. I think I'm gonna still make it. So I have to just see how to check if the node has a name. Yeah, but it's always gonna have a name, that's the thing. Because I still think it makes sense to set the name of the nodes created from codes with the pattern, because then it makes it easier to see from the editor. But then obviously the logic's not gonna depend on that anymore. So I'm thinking about, 'cause I still need to check for the name because I don't want to reset the names of the nodes that I changed on the editor. So let's say I create a node from the code and then I go on the editor and I change its name and I, mainly its name. I don't want to reset from the code next time I run. But it is a kind of confusing thing. I have to, it's not the case. So it's probably a lot easier to always set the name of the node from the code. So if you want the name of the node to change, uh, in the example of the pop-up there, it's better to change from the code because that way the code is always going to recreate the same structure, but it's more about the being able to differentiate, but I'm not really sure if that's going to be very good. So I guess I can check based on the add pattern. So the add's going to be the default when you don't set. And so I think that's what I'm going to do. So class is not exposed. I wasn't getting this before. So this was my concern, like I said. They probably affected somewhere else because this error I'm pretty sure that I didn't put. So it's happening somewhere, and it's probably because of the bind methods or the property. So why is this happening? Extension class this. But it should be registering, that's the thing. Because I'm not changing, like, the node class should be registered already, so it doesn't make sense. I guess this is just related to the docs, but I don't understand why you would do this based on the stuff that I changed there. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Did I make a mistake here? Maybe I didn't add this one. External. I think it is correct, so I'm not really sure what can be going on here. So I think it's obviously related to class DB and the registering. But I'm not really sure. Maybe if I run again. So I'm gonna check to see if it's still working there. And if it is, I'm gonna run again. Then if it shows again, I'll think about it. But I'm probably gonna remove then all the nodes and then run again to see if it works. And then if it does, I'm just gonna change the other. So the other ones are probably gonna change all at once because it's taking a long time to compile. It's interesting that now, so there's something going on here. So maybe I forgot to put one of the. I think I probably forgot. Mm, but maybe not. Because the other time I probably forgot actually because it makes more sense to have this shoe because it would be this part here I think. So the first one is where the thing would be. The other is the inspector and this dock here. And then the other stuff is here, and then these ones I just removed because this one is comes from here probably, and I removed because they are related to other stuff that I didn't want to figure out. So it's HD panel container 0 panel container. So it's this one. I think I just forgot the last time to add this one. Maybe not. It's not showing anything in the middle here. It's showing here, but not here as well. So there's something weird going on. And the rest seems to be correct. So the only thing that changed was this one, and also now it doesn't have the split there on the other side. Split container. Also, there's shoe here, so I think the structure is wrong. Yeah. Might be related to this stuff here, but I'm not really sure if it is because I think it wouldn't make a lot of sense. So maybe the best way is to step over and then see. But I guess I can remove. It might be possible that it was incorrect in the first time, but I think that the first time you're supposed to be because it just feels more right to have both. At this time, it has to be incorrect, I think. So it's more likely that the other one was correct, but then the question is why. So I think it has to do obviously with something like here. because I didn't change the other stuff. So I'm going to remove the node there, and then I'm gonna run again to see what happens. So here. The most confusing part is the traversal there. This is the thing that I was struggling the most because even though it seems that it works if you use breadth first search, it doesn't feel very reliable because there might be edge cases where it doesn't for whatever reason. So like this part here is the one that is kind of tricky, I think, because it really depends. Like I have to remember, but I think that like is the only way that I can think about. It is a compromise, but I'm not really sure if it's possible to do it without this. 'Cause the problem with this one is that if I forget to add a node as external and it is a part of the tree, then it is gonna mess up the structure. But I think if when these situations happen, it's gonna throw an error there in the morning because some of the nodes are not gonna have the parents because they were not transferred to the sync tree. Unless it's a leaf and I forgot to add the leaf, that might happen. But the thing is, I can't see any other way to do it. Like the only other way would be to change all the codes so that all the nodes added inside of the constructor are marked as that. So like it would essentially be the same thing, but I would do the default otherwise. But then I would have to change all the classes that already exist and all the modules and all stuff like that. So I think that route is not very good because of that. So it makes more sense to flag the ones you want to add to the thing. Maybe external is not the best name. I can put like I can think about another name, but obviously the concept would be the same. So I don't understand why like it should be traversing the correct way here, I think. So I start from the root here, then I get the first one, then I pop, so I remove from the list. Then I get the parent for the first one, which would be no. So it would go here, based on the entry points, then call this, and then it would go here to check to see if it is external. It has to be working, otherwise there wouldn't be any nodes there. Because the first time that I got this, that I got the error, I did wrong here, and it didn't add any nodes. So I know that this has to be working. So the first time would go here, so it would add the child to the scene runs as external. Maybe it's because the root node, but it should change after I compiled. So the previous scene root, even though it was cached, should be. Oh, maybe that's the reason. Hmm. No, but I think it doesn't matter because the sync root is gonna be the one that you send to the resource saver, so it's gonna automatically include the roots because the external is only gonna determine what nodes are inserted here based on the logic that I put here. The logic for determining whether or not it's gonna be saved on the scene is gonna be based on the owner. So I guess this is another thing I can do. So I can remove this from here, and I can, but then like it wouldn't make sense because I need to avoid adding the node multiple times. So I think it makes more sense to check here. I was gonna say to just put the condition here to see if I set the the owner or not. So this one, it adds a guest appearance, then guest appearance from the previous parent from the child, removes, and then adds here. I think I have to set. No, I don't have to set the child here because it should be set already. Uh, it's only gonna get here if it is external. So I'm adding here. Oh, it's because of the update probably. Maybe. Yeah, it's because of here. So after I update, because the default's false, is going to. Also, I'm putting true there, but I'm making equal to 0. But I think that it's probably not the issue because. But I'm just gonna make it a boolean so that is easier to think about. And then I have to change to boolean instead of int. So I'm gonna make as false. And the thing is that the other ones are these ones are boolean. So I'm just gonna put as false because it's easier to think about. And then I have to change here so that is bool. So the problem is here, I think. So after you update, or I don't compare. So I think it's easier to put here. No, but I do want to, yeah, but this is the problem. So, so I think it's better. So I'm not gonna put here. Or I guess I can put, no. So, mm. So I'm debating because like the thing is I have to re-update the external value, but external is always gonna be on, I think, for nodes that are added. It doesn't matter because I always want to recreate them. So it's not related to this one for locking the state. So I think I always want to set them. So I think here I'm just gonna put it's gonna be annoying to think about because the name maybe is something else. So essentially I don't want to update the value when it is the external property of the nodes. Because what I think is happening is this is gonna update to false here. So this when I run the when the node already exists is gonna turn to false and then the next iteration fucks up. So I'll think about this later, but I'm gonna put here just set again. So I'm gonna run without compiling first. I forgot to. I'm pretty sure that I deleted the nodes that time. So it looks like it is working. I think it doesn't matter. I don't need to set because when the code runs again, it's gonna set the property anyway. So it doesn't really matter, but it's probably better to because the first time is the one that is gonna add the node to the tree, and then from that point, the node's already on the tree. But maybe it would no, because it's updating one of the nodes with the properties of the other one, and the other one is set by default because of the logic on the code. So I do think it doesn't matter. So now obviously there's something wrong here. So maybe it does matter. I'm gonna compile again, then we'll see. Let me. So I'm gonna delete, then compile, then see if it works. Because it might be because of the this thing. Probably on this one, I'm gonna change to the boolean variable, and then I'm just gonna do a check to see. So I'm probably gonna check to see if the string name is different than, or if the string name doesn't have the. So when you add the child, I think it is on this one that is gonna create the name. But the problem is if this variable is passed, then I'm not really sure if it's gonna. By default, it's gonna include this at here, so I can check to see if the node has this. But maybe there's another. Maybe if I check to see if the node's a string name, like they are checking here. But the problem is it's not gonna be because it's gonna generate this name there. So it's either gonna generate this one or the other. So maybe I can do an OR and then check for both. But I'm not really sure. I think this just creates the node with the name of the class. This one is probably the one that the editor uses. Because when you add the node from the editor, it's just gonna have the name of the class. So I think that's why they did this, sure. But I'm thinking about like an easier way. I don't want to add another flag variable because I think that's just not very good. So maybe when I set the name, I set the variable. Yeah, I guess I can see if I can check if I can do the same thing that I did on the other one. But I'm not really sure. Oh, so this one only has one argument, so I can do this. So what I'm gonna do is just change this value, this function here. And then when I set the name from the code, I'm just gonna pass another argument. So it's gonna be false by default. And the other argument is gonna be another flag variable, I think, that indicates whether or not the name was set. But I'm not really sure if that's the best. I think that doesn't work because it's gonna. I have to think about an easy way to differentiate because I'm thinking about a situation where I create a node from code and then I change the name on the editor. So for whatever reason, or if I just set the name from the code as well. Because right now, if I set the name of the pop-up, for example, then it's not gonna matter because on the logic of this function is gonna reset the name based on the pattern here because it resets based on this. So obviously the easiest thing to do would be to check if the node has a name, but then I have to check for the pattern there, and I don't like that very much because of the other way to set the name, which is based on the class. So I'm trying to think about if there's another way to check if I set the name of the node to something else. But I guess if I put the flag variable on the name there, it's probably enough because I'm not setting the names. But you're gonna set the name internally, I think. So it's not very good at also, I think. I have to think about. Probably I'm gonna do the other stuff first, then I'll think about this later. So I think this happens in the beginning when you change the one of the classes that the other ones rely on because this is probably from modules or plugins or something like that. So just for creating the documentation. So I think that after the first time that you build and then you run, it's gonna cache this information so that the other times it doesn't show this stuff. So I think that it's only showing this because I'm changing the node class and all this stuff here probably depends on the node class. So if you change other classes, it's not gonna show this stuff here. Regenerating editor help cache. So I think every time that you change a class that the editor help depends on, is going to regenerate the cache and then it does this stuff here. So I think it's not an error. It's probably the same way before. Hmm. It's also not adding the other ones. Huh. That is weird. It should be changing everything. External false. So maybe it's related to this stuff here. Because I changed all of them through here, so it should be adding all of them. Hmm. Maybe it's because but I don't think that the sing root should be external. Let me make the sing root external to see if that solves. I don't think it's gonna solve this. Maybe it will. Because then how is it adding the other ones? Maybe it still works because it adds based on the subtrees. So it might be because of the root is not. But the root is gonna be another logic there, I think. So it doesn't matter. It's gonna be the second condition, so I don't think it's gonna change anything. It's gonna hit here. So it makes more sense. I'm gonna do both for now, but it's probably only needed here if I need to set the thing as true. But I don't think it's not. It's probably something else. So obviously it has to do with this as well. Hmm. Maybe here, but like it doesn't make sense because this if the problem was here because I'm not setting external here, it would only be a problem the second time that I run this. So I don't understand what's going on. So if it doesn't work, I'm probably gonna go over with the debugger. But I'm probably gonna stop here and I'm going to do this off stream because it's been a long time already since I'm streaming. But it shouldn't be that hard to solve these problems because it's basically the same thing that I've been doing before. And before I know that it works, so it's probably something like weird going on based on the logic here of the traversal for some reason. Like the weird thing is that it works with the groups that is not working here, so I assume that it shouldn't be that hard to figure out what is the problem. Then once I figure out, once I figure out and fix, then I just do the same thing for the other variables. Just add the extra variables and then change the functionality of add child node so it works with the extra variables. And if I'm able to do with all of these three, then I think it's gonna be like this part's gonna be finished because I'm gonna be able to do it. And I'm gonna change the update root node function as well. But I'm probably gonna keep the same, just change the order. So put the node first and then put the string, the entry point. And I'm still gonna keep the entry point as a string, but I'm gonna add as part of the property of the node as well. So let me see. So it can't be because of the first one because obviously it has here. So it is obviously something related to the levels. So I think that the way that I'm doing now is not adding an extra level, and when I do it based on the groups, it does that. So obviously the easiest thing I can do to check is also to just do the same way that I'm doing now, but instead of making as an external variable, I just change the function so that instead of setting them, instead of setting the variable, I just put the node as part of the group. That's the easiest thing that I can do. It might be because of this stuff here. Problem is that stepping over is gonna be hard to figure out because like I'm gonna have to go node by node and then see. But I assume it's something to do with the levels there of the breadth first search traversal. But I don't understand why the node being part of the group would put an extra level while making external wouldn't. That's the thing that is kind of confusing. This, no, but the name is not gonna change anything. It's not even putting here. Hmm. Oh, it's because I'm not setting on the child. Yeah, that's what I should do. So I set here. That's the problem. So that's why the levels are not working. Oh, but maybe not actually. Maybe I set on both. I'm not really sure if that makes sense. But I think it does because this is kind of the issue because when I'm adding there, yeah, I'm checking to see if the node, like on the cases, yeah, I think it has to be this because of this example here. So if I set on the current node, the external value, then I think just to make sure I'm gonna set on both, but probably makes more sense to set on the child. Because every time I add the node as a child, then I want to say that the node that was added is gonna be a part of the thing. So I think that this is the error there. But it probably makes sense to set on both. So I think I'm gonna set on both, and then I can remove from there. Because then obviously the root's gonna add children. So I think like I can remove from here and just, but I'm gonna leave it on the other one because it's safer, I think. You just leave here because of the updates. I'm not sure if it matters that much. Yeah, but I'm gonna test like this. So I'm gonna remove everything again. So last thing that I'm gonna check, then I'm going to stop streaming, regardless of whether or not it works, and then I'm gonna do the rest of the variables off stream. Oh, did I? So I'm gonna test like this. I'm gonna do both, whatever. So I think here I'm just always gonna set as true, and the other one is set. But it makes sense to always be true as well. So maybe I should, maybe I should remove the argument and just put as true. I think because it doesn't make any sense to use the function if you're not gonna set it as true. Yeah, so I'm gonna do that as well. Because otherwise, like, what would be the point? You just add the other one. So I think that makes more sense. So I just always set true here, and then I remove the arguments. So now it should be correct, I think. We're just passing. So I set both of them to true, because I want both of them to be part of the scene, and then call the other one. And in case I want to add a child and I don't want to make the child part of the scene, I just call the normal function. So instead of the constructor of the other nodes, probably makes more sense to call the normal one. And that way it allows you to encapsulate the scope on the editor. So it's basically allowing you to have a range of what you want to have access to on the editor. I think that's the difference. And also, I think if it's not even because of that, it's because of there's the additional problem that based on the way that I'm doing, it's gonna add the nodes more times, I think, than they exist because it's gonna add both as part of the constructor of the node that is added and as external children because of the owner thing. So like the other way to solve this would be to change the entire code so that all the nodes added through the constructor. Actually, I could make it based on the owner as well. So maybe I don't need this variable. Oh, but I guess this is the problem is because if I don't set the owner, then it doesn't add the other ones. So like there is no way to differentiate the nodes that I'm adding that are external and internal because of the way that I'm traversing the tree. So it doesn't make sense to like there is no way to set only the owner for only the nodes that are created outside of the constructors. So because I have to set the owner of all of them, I think it has to be here, I think. You have to set the owner because otherwise it's not gonna save into the scene. So it saves the root here, and then next time it's gonna go here. And then here you have to set the child as well that you are adding to the owner. So you're removing the child from the previous parents. And then here you have to set so otherwise it's not going to save. So this way there is no way to make the distinction between the nodes that are created inside of constructors from the nodes that are created outside. So what happens is that it's going to add the nodes twice. Whenever you have a node that adds other nodes as children, inside of its constructor is gonna when it initializes the tree from the editor is going to add the node twice because now you have the same node. So it would be like on this class here, since it adds this grabber inside of the constructor, what the editor is gonna do is gonna run the constructor for this class and it's gonna add this as a child of the BM slider, but then it's gonna add an extra one that it was added through the manager here. Because then I'm setting I'm setting the owner externally. So what's gonna happen is that there's gonna be two extra nodes, and this in some classes is gonna give you a warning there, and it's also gonna mess up the structure of the scene, I think. So this is the issue. So hopefully now it works. So the other ones are gonna be basically the same thing. This one I'm just gonna change so that I set the property of the node instead. Maybe this one is better to leave outside because then I don't force all the other nodes should. Because there's far more nodes that are not gonna use the property than there is that the ones that they will. So I think that this probably makes more sense to leave the way that I have there, where I set this externally. Because then the logic is only going to be related to the headless code and it's not going to interfere with the other stuff. So I think this one is I'm probably going to leave the way that it is there. And it has to be a string name as well. So there isn't much I can do about this. Like it is kind of annoying because it increases the chance of making a mistake, like a typo, when you write the name there for HD roots. But I think like leaving a letter or something like that is also not very good because it's not very descriptive. So it's better to just leave like this, I think. But I might have to change this as well because here, what happens if you put another entry point? I think if you put another entry point, then it has to be like this because it means that the node must exist. So I'm just passing the entry point. So if it doesn't find here, it has to throw a warning because you can't put a subtree on a node that doesn't exist on the original sync tree if you're not gonna put on the roots. So I think it does make sense to leave it like this. So if I'm adding a subtree on a node that I created from the editor, for example, it's just gonna hit this branch. Then it's gonna find the node on the sync tree. Then it's gonna hit here, and then it's gonna remove the parents, or it's gonna get the parents. Yeah, it's gonna remove the parent if it has, which is gonna be no in case you're adding a subtree because the parent's no pointer. But then it's just gonna add the subtree to the to that point to the entry point. So I think it does work. Okay, so now it seems that is working. It's weird that the other thing doesn't show up there though. So the panel doesn't show up. That's kind of weird. But this was the same structure that I had before, so it is working like. Oh, so it does show up, but it doesn't have a size here. So I guess if I set the size, I think it's because. So this panel is because of the logic of the editor probably. So it probably it starts as the default where it doesn't show the bottom part here, I think. Yeah, so it starts as this. So this is the reason why it doesn't show here. So I think that based on the editor caching that they're gonna do there, or some editor logic, they're gonna. I think it's probably based on the cache. So the editor has a cached file that it keeps track of on the projects, or it creates a cache file on the projects, I think. So I think it's here editor. Not really sure if it's editor layout, but probably. So these are all all files that the editor keeps track of, that it caches based on the state of whatever you did on the scene. So probably based on one of these files is gonna get the value of whether or not this was open or not in the previous time that you used. And then based on that, it's gonna set the values of the panel here. So this is the reason why I think it's not showing here, but it does show there. Yeah, so this it saves the state here probably for the project. And I think this is done by the doc manager that they have there, the context manager. So they have a class that manages the docs. So after I set all these variables and I'm able to synchronize in the way that I'm thinking there, and I do everything, then what I'm gonna do is continue to study the editor layouts. So the next step, so after I'm pretty confident that after I implement this variables here, it's gonna be exactly the way that I was thinking about. Where the biggest thing that I'm not 100% sure is that is kind of more complicated is when you have situations where you create subtrees from code and then you want to change them on the editor. Like how do you make sure that the code you run doesn't interfere with the state? So let's say, for example, I change because the situation I was talking about there. So let's say I change this for scene, the name, and because I don't want the state to be reset, after I add this boolean variable here on the property, all I would have to do is to go here and then select the property here. So in case like this is the one that I put there. So when you use that property macro and you put the setters and getters, it's gonna expose that property on the editor. And the way that it's gonna work is that based on the string there that you put on the add property, it's gonna find the function on the method bind class. Because it keeps track of the functions on a hash map that maps the name of the class, the name of the function with the pointers, with the pointers, function pointers. So based on this property info here, this is gonna hold the name of the property, and then this is gonna be the name of the setters and getters, the functions. So inside of this function is gonna be from class DB. this is gonna create a method bind class based on the names that you put here. So this function here from class DB allows you, based on the name of the class, which is the type of the class, and the name of the function, is gonna get the function pointer, and it's gonna get this method bind based on the class info, which is the class that they use to keep track of all the classes, all the class types on Godot. So this allows them to basically cache the setters and getters, because this class holds the state for the function, which is this class is basically the one that Godot is going to use to update the property that you put here. And it's going to cache there based on this. So guess the type. So it creates this method bind for the getter and setter, and it's going to put on this thing here, and then it's going to cache this on the class info, which is the global object that they use to keep track of the classes. So inside of the type is going to have this information, and this is going to allow the editor, and I think the engine as well, but I'm not 100% sure of the engine, but editor I'm 100% sure, that whenever you call there, it's going to call the functions that you subscribe on that properties. So what I'm going to do is create this other value here, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did for this one, but it's going to be a Boolean variable that allows me to keep the state, if in case I want, of the node, so that it doesn't update, because all the other Boolean variable is going to be to check whether or not the node's already part of the scene on the add child node. So the way that it's going to work is that on this function here, instead of checking based on the name, I'm going to check based on another Boolean variable that I'm going to set here in the first time that I'm adding the nodes to the scene. So both here and here. So that the next time that you want to run the code is going to hit this branch, because the node is already going to exist on the scene tree, the root of the scene, which means that you would run this function here. And this function is going to update the state of the node that already exists on the scene with the state that you create on code. And the reason why is because if you change some properties here, then obviously it makes sense that the scene reflects whatever state the code has. But the issue is, if you change the name here, for example, then you would just reset the name to the previous one. If I do it like this, I think. The name is going to be tricky, I think. But the name I can set from the code as well, and it doesn't matter. But like for other properties that the class has, that let's say that I don't want the code to update, I would just set the value to true here from the editor, and then I would put the condition inside of here that checks for that value. So if the value exists, then it doesn't update the property anymore from the code. But the tricky thing about this is like about the structure of the tree, because the code would be essentially recreating the tree each time. So, but I think if I do like this, it's gonna work, because I'm gonna be checking based on a Boolean variable. So the first time, I'm always gonna make sure, like the code is always gonna be certain that the nodes are gonna be cached based on the Boolean variable, because I'm only gonna be setting them to true from this part here of the code. So it always guarantees that the node exists when it hits this branch, regardless of the name that the node has. The only thing that is kind of tricky is going to be based on this here, because right now I'm finding the node based on the child name, which is this pattern here, and this is the part that I'm going to have to change, I think, because I want to have the flexibility to have whatever name I want there. So I guess this is the part that I'm gonna have to spend some time thinking about, because I want the ability to have any name here that doesn't depend on the pattern. So I guess what I can do is just get. But if I like the first thing that I thought is either get the node, the name from the node that I passed here, or get from this name, and then check if either one exists for here. But I don't think that's very good, because then obviously you can have situations where you're gonna have both nodes on the sync tree, but it's not what you meant to do. So it's much better if I can find another way to make sure. There's I need a way to Yeah, I guess this is the challenge in this situation. Because the problem is the structure. So how do you make sure that the current node that you're checking here is the same one that you changed the name here? I guess you can check. The problem with checking based on the parent is that this name here is not going to be the one that it's not going to be the name of the node that is actually on the tree. It's going to be the name of the node that you created through the code, which is different names. So this parent, the purpose of this is just to allow the child to remove itself from the previous one. On this case here, that's basically. Oh, but here is checking based on this one. I guess maybe I think that this name is actually gonna be the one. Hmm. Because it's gonna set the name on the previous one. So on the first time that it runs, it's gonna set the name here. So like this would be the name of the root here, for example. So this pattern here, the first time that it adds, it sets the name of this. And then in the next iteration, it's gonna be that name, so it's gonna be able to find on the tree. So maybe I can do it based on the parents. Unless it's a situation where, yeah, but even if, oh, I think I have to check here as well. I don't understand why it's not giving me an error. Because I just realized that the root is always gonna hit here, and I'm not checking to see if the root already exists on the. I guess it's because I'm doing by the name, so I'm gonna have. Once I change this, I'm gonna have to change this one as well. Because now it's not giving me an error of the root because it checks this condition first. Yeah, I remember because I was checking this condition here as well, but then obviously it was adding the root twice. So it doesn't add the root twice because it checks here, and the previous time it added already, so it's gonna hit this part here instead of going through here. But once I change this to the flag variable, I'm gonna have to check here as well to see if the node already exists on the tree. But maybe not actually, because it's gonna be the same thing. It's just gonna be based on the variable. Yeah, so I think it doesn't matter. So maybe I can do it based on the parent name here. So maybe I can find the parent, but then I still think it's kind of tricky. So I'm gonna have to think about this, like how to solve this. The challenge is how to make sure that regardless of the node name, I can update the node here. I can make sure that I don't add an extra node, and because I'm changing I'm making a difference between the state that is created through code and the state that is created through the editor. And the difference is going to be the nodes that I set the flag variable so that they are not updated. But they're still going to be being added here to the code. So the flag variable allows me to always make sure that they are never up. There's never more than the nodes that are created from the code, but it doesn't necessarily allow me to. Yeah, the properties is the one that is kind of difficult. So either I'm gonna have to change inside of this branch, or I have to change inside of the function. Like based on the logic that I'm doing here to find the properties, I can figure out a way based on the values there. So obviously based on the name would be the easiest on the, or I create another, maybe I could check before I do the type here. Could check based on the name of the property, but I'm not sure. I'll think about this later. So I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna add the other variables of string, and then After I'm done with all of this, then the next thing is gonna be to create, just change the values here to see, change the values and also study the editor node, so I understand how they create the layout here. Because the main thing that I want to do now is to create layout structures from code. And then after I do this, I'm going to just put the logic on the other folder that I'm going to create functions that create different layouts. So like I have a starting point. Then after I do that, I think I'm going to leave this project as a project where I test a bunch of stuff. And then I create another one where I'm going to develop. So I test on this one first, then on the other one I develop based on the functions that I create from this one here. Or maybe I'll have two projects, one where I just test. I think I'm probably going to do this iteration here, where I use this one to test, and then after I create the components from here, then I move to other ones. So I'm probably gonna test a bunch of times until I have enough confidence that, like, I close the feedback loop system to make sure that, because I need to test all possible situations that I'm thinking about. Like, not even tests, it's just like to get into the flow of seeing how this is gonna work. So like creating, trying to create projects basically with this one to see like what usually happens. So like there's probably parts that you're gonna create from code, and then you want to change the state from the editor, and then you want to change the state from the code again. So what I assume that's gonna happen is that there is gonna be a feedback loop where usually you're gonna go through like a sequence. So I want to get this sequence down, the iteration, and once I get the iteration, then it's all a matter of like speeding up the cycle. And then like once I have that, then it's gonna become like each time it becomes easier and easier to build projects, because I'm already gonna know roughly the structure and also the state of the nodes. So it's both understanding how to do the composition of the different nodes, and also understanding the usual like studying the main classes. I assume that it's gonna follow the 80-20 rule, where 20% of the nodes are used 80% of the time. So it's a matter of figuring out what are the 20%, and then understanding very well their properties, which are probably gonna be base classes like the control node or node 2D, node 3D. Those are probably main ones, and then also the VBox, HBox, and split container as well for the layout. So nodes like that. So memorizing or becoming very familiar with their properties and how they work, and also becoming very familiar of how usually it's going to play out from creating the scene from the code and then changing the state from the editor and going back and forth between the two. Once that becomes established, then it becomes a lot easier to iterate. And then after that, you can, after that, I'm probably going to try to create a bunch of stuff from this point. So see you next time.